This flood didn't come from the sky. It came from a mountain. Near the Nepal-Tibet border, a massive collapse of ice and rock suddenly crashed into a river. And that impact sent a violent surge of water, mud and debris racing downstream. The flood moved through narrow Himalayan valleys, destroying bridges, roads, buildings, and everything caught in its path. But here's what makes this disaster even stranger. People initially believed an earthquake had triggered it. Scientists later found that the ground shaking was actually caused by the collapse itself. So how does a collapsing glacier turn into a devastating flash flood? And why did it happen so suddenly? To understand that, we need to go to the top of the Himalayas. To understand how this happened, we first need to follow the water back to where it started. The disaster began near the Nepal-Tibet border in the high Himalayas. This is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Massive mountains rise thousands of meters above the valleys. And between those mountains are narrow rivers that carry water down toward Nepal. One of them is the Bot Koshi River. But on that day, something from high in the mountains suddenly entered the river. Ice, rock, mud, and an enormous amount of debris. The impact transformed the normally flowing river into a violent surge moving downstream. And because the valley is so narrow, there was almost nowhere for that water and debris to escape. It was forced forward, straight toward the communities below. The further the flood traveled, the more destructive it became. Roads disappeared. Bridges were destroyed. Buildings were damaged. And the river carried massive amounts of debris downstream. But this still leaves the biggest question. What exactly happened high above the river? Because the flood was only the final part of the story. The real disaster began when a huge mass of ice and rock broke away from the mountain. But what exactly broke away from the mountain? High above the river, a massive section of ice and rock suddenly collapsed. Imagine thousands of tons of frozen material sitting on a steep Himalayan slope. When that mass breaks loose, it does not simply slide gently downhill. It can accelerate rapidly, picking up more rocks, mud, ice, and water as it moves. And when this enormous mass slammed into the river, the impact displaced huge amounts of water. The river was suddenly carrying far more than it normally could. Water mixed with mud, rocks, and ice, turning the flow into something closer to a moving concrete wall. And because the river was trapped inside a narrow Himalayan valley, the energy had nowhere to go. It was pushed downstream. And everything in its path became part of the flood. But there was another terrifying clue. The collapse was so powerful that it produced ground shaking. Strong enough that people initially believed an earthquake had struck. But scientists investigating the event found something surprising. The shaking was not the cause of the disaster. It was actually a consequence of the mountain collapsing. And that changes the entire story.